Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something a little unusual. Imagine you're standing in the middle of ancient Rome, not at the Colosseum, not beneath a marble arch, but ankle-deep in muddy runoff by the edge of a drain. Steam rises off the cobblestones after a hot day. A cart squeaks past. A stray dog drinks from a puddle you really hope didn't come from the bathhouse latrines. And just beside you, a small, forgotten shrine nestles in the stone. A little goddess named Cloacina watches over it all, and yes, her realm is the sewer. You probably won't survive this tour with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere interesting, or just curled up in bed, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your slow, sloshing stroll through the underbelly of the Eternal City. Rome, even in its most glorious era, smells. There's no polite way around it. Despite the shimmering togas, the grand marble steps, the golden laurel wreaths perched on sweaty brows, this city is full of people, and those people need to go somewhere. And so, one of the oldest monuments in Rome isn't a temple or a triumphal arch, it's a drain. A massive, ancient sewer called the Cloaca Maxima. The Great Drain. At first glance, it might seem absurd to build a religion around plumbing. But the Romans, ever practical, found reverence in everything that worked. And when it came to keeping a city of 1 million people, plus their livestock, from drowning in their own waste, they didn't just engineer a solution, they deified it. You trail your fingers along a mossy stone wall, water trickling just beside your feet. The air grows cooler, thick with damp. This is where the Romans believed Cloacina lived. Originally a minor Etruscan deity, possibly just a personification of cleanliness or flowing water, she was absorbed into Roman religion the way leftover stew is thrown into a fresh pot. Over time, she gained a new jurisdiction, sewers. There's a tiny statue of her near the Forum, placed just above the entrance to a stormwater outlet. She's delicate, serene, and probably holding her breath. Some sources claim she was originally linked to the goddess Venus, which would make her responsible for both love and, well, let's just say post-love hygiene. Historians still argue whether Cloacina was truly worshipped or simply tolerated, like a god no one wanted to invite to dinner but couldn't quite ignore. But what's clear is this: the Romans built her a shrine. They named streets after her. And most importantly, they kept her sewer clean. Mostly. You kneel beside the water now, watching it carry bits of straw, spoiled food, and, is that a sandal? It floats gently past, headed down toward the Tiber. The Cloaca Maxima is still partially in use, 2,000 years later. That's more than can be said for most modern plumbing. Or politicians. As you inch deeper into the tunnel, the sound of surface life dims. The rumble of wagons fades. You're left with dripping echoes and your own thoughts. And maybe the faintest smell of roast boar from a street vendor above, which, given the setting, is either deeply comforting or deeply disturbing. In ancient times, the Cloaca Maxima started as a simple dish. Rome's earliest settlers, the Etruscans and Latins, lived in huts perched on hills, surrounded by marshland. When it rained, the valley between those hills filled with water. And not the pretty kind. This was swampy, disease-ridden mire. Stank. It bred mosquitoes the size of olives. And it made expansion nearly impossible. So they dug. They drained. They shaped the land with stone and sweat. And in doing so, they changed history. You reach a curve in the tunnel, where older brickwork meets newer additions. Some stones are stamped with markings, likely indicating the work crews or time periods. Others have worn smooth, their surfaces slick from centuries of flow. It's like reading the veins of the city, only these veins carry more than just blood. One block has a faint carving of a fish. Another has what appears to be a vulgar joke, although the Latin's too faded to be sure. If it is a joke, it's probably about bathhouse accidents. Romans were not subtle. You pause, listening. Somewhere above, someone laughs. Perhaps at a tavern, or during an argument over the price of olives. Life goes on, oblivious to the steady cleansing below. But this underground river was, and still is, vital. It wasn't just a place for waste, it was Rome's silent guardian. When floods threatened, it channeled water safely away. When disease loomed, it offered some hope of sanitation. And when emperors wanted to show off, they'd boast about how well it worked. Even Augustus, the king of humble brags, made sure people knew he'd expanded and improved the city's drainage. It wasn't just civil service, it was divine service. After all, if the gods lived among men, surely they'd prefer dry feet. The Cloaca Maxima eventually connected to nearly every major building in Rome: the Forum, the temples, the bathhouses, the wealthiest villas. Even the Colosseum, where lions and gladiators drew blood under screaming crowds, had drains leading here. You might say their final bow ended down the drain. And somewhere along the way, people began offering tiny gifts. Coins. Flowers. Maybe the occasional carved charm. It was superstition, sure, but it was also gratitude. Because in a city where fire, plague, and political scandal were just part of the weekly schedule, a functioning sewer felt like a miracle. You feel a breeze drift through the tunnel, cool and oddly fragrant. Someone's probably burned incense at Cloacina's shrine again. It mixes strangely with the earthy scent of damp stone and ancient runoff. You take one last glance upstream before moving forward. The water continues its endless journey, unbothered. The goddess, wherever she is, remains silent. Watching. Waiting. You keep moving, your steps echoing softly against the curved walls. The deeper you go, the further back in time you feel yourself drifting, until the tunnel opens into a vision of what came before Rome even had sewers. The ground is soft beneath your feet, not stone but soggy soil. You're standing in the middle of a marshy plain between the future Capitoline and Palatine hills. The air buzzes with the high-pitched whine of insects, and you swat absently at a mosquito the size of a thumbnail. It's the 7th century BCE, and this place isn't yet Rome. It's just damp. You're not alone here. Around you, small bands of settlers have clustered together on the hilltops. Their huts are made from sticks, mud, and straw, with roofs that droop like sleepy eyes. Smoke rises lazily from cooking fires. Down here in the lowland, though, it's all puddles and muck. The kind of place where you lose a sandal and your pride in one go. These early people, probably Etruscans and Latins, had to be wildly stubborn, or just wildly optimistic, to settle in this bog. But necessity, as always, overruled comfort. The hills were defensible. The marshy basin between them could one day become a shared center. And most importantly, they had livestock. Livestock that, like all living things, left behinds. You watch a cow relieve itself unceremoniously into the mud. A few children chase a pig that's gotten too close to their cooking pot. And a man in a linen tunic is trying to dig what might generously be called a drainage ditch. It's going badly. You trudge over to get a better look. The man's tool is a curved wooden shovel, worn smooth from use. Every time he scoops a little trench, the water just slides back in. He curses softly, something about Jupiter's toenails, and keeps digging. This is where sanitation began, not with marble, not with gods, but with a man ankle-deep in mud, trying not to drown his garden. Historians still argue whether these early attempts at drainage were coordinated efforts or just a series of desperate individual struggles. Some believe local leaders organized primitive waterworks. Others think it was more organic, neighbors watching one another and slowly learning what worked. Either way, this was the origin story of Roman plumbing. Trial, error, and a lot of wet tunics. You step aside as a family sloshes past, carrying bundles of reeds and baskets of fish. The river Tiber isn't far from here. It floods unpredictably, surging into the basin like an uninvited relative who eats everything and then sleeps on your floor. During those floods, the entire valley becomes a shallow lake. Anything not lashed down floats away, including, sometimes, small children. One woman nearby has lashed wooden planks together to make a kind of raised walkway. She struts proudly across it, only to be followed by a goat who immediately knocks the whole thing sideways. There's a splash, a scream, and the unmistakable sound of someone swearing vengeance on goats in general. It's all a bit chaotic. But beneath the mess, there's momentum. The settlers begin to understand that if they're going to stay here and build something real, they need to tame the land itself. Which means they need more than just holes and guesses. They need structure. And so, over time, stone replaces mud. Trenches become channels. And most crucially, the hills begin to be connected, not just by paths, but by shared spaces. The area between the hills will one day become the Roman Forum. But right now, it's a murky basin that smells like sheep and regret. That's where the Cloaca Maxima begins, not as a marvel, but as a necessity. The swamp needs to go. The marsh must be drained. So the early Romans, likely under Etruscan influence, begin the massive project of reshaping their land. They line the low areas with stone. They create channels to guide the water into the Tiber. They build up the ground, slowly, layer by layer, dumping refuse and rubble to create solid footing. And somewhere in this muddy transition from chaos to civilization, the seeds of reverence are planted. You pause beside a group of men hauling enormous blocks of volcanic stone. They're swearing under their breath and using a system of levers that seems equal parts genius and madness. A supervisor, bare-chested and sunburned, is yelling encouragement, though it mostly sounds like threats. It's all sweat and rhythm and the scraping of stone on stone. One of the workers glances up at you, wipes his brow, and mutters something about how even the gods should shovel once in a while. There's no Cloacina yet, not formally. But the feeling is there. The sense that something watches over the effort. Maybe not a glamorous goddess, but a quiet presence, like the whisper of water moving through stone. A spirit of purification. Or maybe just the human urge to make sense of the stink. The Romans, even at this early stage, begin to see infrastructure as sacred. And why not? When your survival depends on whether your ditch holds up during the next storm, it makes sense to pray over it. One quirky tidbit from this period: archaeological digs have uncovered small offerings buried in early sewer channels. Bits of bone, pottery shards, and even tiny figurines, possibly tokens of luck or protection. Were they meant to appease a sewer god? Or just tossed in for lack of a trash bin? Scholars disagree. But you have to admit, it's oddly sweet to think someone once offered a doll to the gods of drainage. You step back as the men hoist a final block into place. The channel is narrow but deep. Water trickles in from one side and exits cleanly on the other. It's the beginning of something huge. A child claps nearby, delighted by the flow. A dog laps at the water, then decides against it. A woman lights a tiny bundle of herbs and waves it over the stone, whispering something under her breath. Is it a prayer? A spell? Or just a hope that tomorrow's flood will stay away? You'll never know for sure. But one thing is certain: this is how Rome begins to rise. Not with legions or emperors, but with a trench, a prayer, and the relentless belief that even muck can be tamed. You step forward carefully, your footfalls echoing against stone now, not mud. The soft squelch of swampy earth has been replaced by the deliberate rhythm of something man-made. It's centuries later, and the city around you has grown. Huts have become houses. Planks have become roads. Rome is no longer a soggy dream but a booming, chaotic, ambitious place full of people, carts, chickens, and opinions. And under it all, beneath the cobbled streets and marble facades, a vast, stony mouth begins to yawn wide. The Cloaca Maxima is taking shape. You find yourself alongside a construction crew. Their tunics are dust-streaked, muscles taut from hauling stone. The scent in the air is no longer just the must of damp soil. It's the tang of wet limestone and fresh-cut travertine. You're here to witness the birth of one of the oldest sewer systems still in existence. And oddly, it begins like a Roman wedding, with a lot of shouting, some sacrificial animals, and at least 3 arguments about drainage angles. The Romans didn't invent sewers, but they perfected them with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Drawing from the Etruscans and earlier civilizations, they engineered the Cloaca Maxima to serve 2 purposes: drain the marshy valley that once divided the hills, and carry away the refuse of a growing city. And while some empires may have given that job to slaves or ignored it entirely, the Romans treated it like high art. You're crouched beside an engineer now, a bearded man with calloused hands and a wax tablet full of notations. He's explaining the gradient of the tunnel to a group of laborers who are more interested in their lunch, but you listen. It's all about slope. Without the right incline, water stagnates. With too steep a slope, the stone lining will erode. There's a precise angle to it, a perfect Roman balance between chaos and control. Just like my mother-in-law, one of the workers mutters, eliciting a chorus of laughs. You chuckle too, but then glance down at the stone being laid. It's volcanic tough, light but strong, quarried from the Alban Hills. The Romans loved this stuff. Easy to carve, yet durable enough to withstand centuries of runoff, and the occasional unfortunate object flushed down with it. Like that one senator's ring, which is still probably somewhere down here. They work in layers, stone first, then mortar, then more stone. Arches are added to support the weight of the city above. It's a marvel of engineering, yes, but also of trust. Imagine building your home above a gaping tunnel that never sleeps, carrying everything from stormwater to street waste to whatever the baker tossed out yesterday. It's both impressive and slightly revolting. You walk the length of a new tunnel section. It's still dry, no water has flowed through yet, and the air smells like fresh dust. Flickering torchlight dances along the curved ceiling. The space is eerily beautiful, like a chapel for forgotten things. And in a way, that's exactly what it becomes. Because as the sewer takes form, something curious begins to happen. People start treating it not just as a utility, but as a place of ritual, of superstition, of worship. One day, someone, no one knows exactly who, declares that this mighty tunnel needs a guardian. Not a god of war or wine or wisdom. Not something glamorous. No, it needs a deity of the dark, damp, and frankly disgusting. It needs Cloacina. Now, you may be wondering how a goddess ends up in charge of waste. It's a fair question. Cloacina likely began as a local water spirit, perhaps even part of the Venus cult, worshipped in small household altars. Her name literally means the purifier, or she who cleanses. So in theory, she was about hygiene. But in practice? She got sewers. Historians still argue whether she was officially part of the Roman pantheon or more of a polite fiction. But what we do know is that she had a shrine, Edicula, right near the Forum, perched above one of the earliest outlets of the Cloaca Maxima. People would stop there, toss in coins, whisper prayers, maybe burn a little myrrh, all in hopes that their waste would flow away cleanly and not back up on a festival day. And here's the kicker, this wasn't seen as odd. In fact, Roman religion was deeply entwined with daily infrastructure. There were gods for doors, Janus, boundaries, terminus, crossroads, Lares, and even mildew, Robigus. So a sewer goddess? Entirely reasonable. You pause near a carved tablet set into the sewer wall. It's worn, but the lettering is still legible. It reads, "To Cloacina, purifier of Rome." Someone cared enough to immortalize that dedication in stone. Nearby, a rat scurries past, entirely unimpressed. You hear footsteps above, civilians going about their lives. You imagine them oblivious to the workers below, chiseling, measuring, laying stone to carry away their waste in silence. The Romans had a strange sense of priorities, but when it came to making sure their streets didn't flood and their homes didn't reek, they were clear-eyed, build it well, and make the gods happy. One curious fringe detail from this period? Some accounts suggest that young Roman boys were taken on a kind of civic tour of the Cloaca Maxima to understand how the city worked. Like an ancient version of a school field trip, but instead of a museum, you got a first-hand look at filth. It was meant to instill both respect for public works and humility. Because let's be honest, once you've seen where your bathwater ends up, it's hard to feel superior. You duck under a low arch and emerge into a slightly older section of the sewer. This part is darker, cooler. The stones glisten with moisture. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a faint drip, 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 like the city's heartbeat, slowed to a crawl. The first flushes of civilization have begun. Not the kind that sparkle, but the kind that gurgle quietly underfoot, carrying civilization's waste and its reverence out to the river beyond. You breathe in deeply, regret it, and keep walking. The tunnel arches overhead like the inside of some massive, slumbering beast. Your footsteps now feel softer, muffled by centuries of silt and stories. As you move forward, a glint catches your eye. Just ahead, set into the stone, a small, rounded niche. You approach and there she is. Cloacina. She isn't grand. No dramatic pose. No flowing robe billowing in invisible wind. Just a simple figure carved into pale stone, serene, still, and surrounded by incense offerings long since turned to dust. You crouch down, inspecting the base. There's residue of old coins, maybe a wilted garland left during some long-forgotten spring ritual. And over it all, the faint scent of lavender? The Romans, you realize, didn't joke about sanitation. At least not entirely. Cloacina, Venus Cloacina, to be official, is a strange contradiction. A goddess of purity who oversees waste. A patroness of beauty and cleanliness who reigns over sewage. You can practically hear a Roman housewife muttering, "Figures?" The gods are always ironic. According to tradition, the shrine of Cloacina stood right in the forum, near a spot where two tribes once reconciled their differences during the city's early days. Some legends say the Sabines and Romans, mid-conflict, met here and literally buried the hatchet, along with some less ceremonial waste. The spot was marked. A small circular platform was built over a drain, and a statue erected. Cloacina, goddess of harmony and, apparently, helpful plumbing. Historians still argue whether this shrine was originally to Venus or whether Cloacina was her own entity. Some think the names were conflated later, like a divine rebranding. Others believe the connection was deliberate, that the Romans saw no contradiction between love and latrines. After all, both require a certain filth. You reach out and touch the stone. It's cool and rough beneath your fingers, a little damp. There's moss creeping into the corners. But the figure remains, head held high, gaze fixed slightly upward. Unbothered. Undeterred. You stand, imagining what this space looked like in its prime. Sunlight filtering down through an opening. The murmur of forum crowds above. A priest or two lighting incense, tossing in a handful of herbs. Maybe even a senator pausing to murmur a quick prayer before an important vote. Please, Cloacina, let the pipes hold, and let my opponent forget his speech. It wasn't just religious sentiment that brought people here, it was fear. A blocked drain wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Streets flooded, foundations weakened, disease spread. The Cloaca Maxima wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. And so, little shrines to Cloacina popped up not just near the forum but along lesser drains, near bathhouses, even in private homes. A token here, a flower there. Keep the water moving. Keep the city clean. Keep the goddess happy. You step back into the tunnel, the shrine fading behind you, replaced by more practical details, gutters, junctions, smaller feeder channels. The system is vast, like a labyrinth beneath the city. And it isn't just waste water flowing through it. There are echoes, voices. You pass a side passage where graffiti scrawled in charcoal is still faintly visible. It reads, "Cloacina, forgive me. I dropped the ring." There's a crude sketch of a man weeping, his hands held up in despair. Next to it, someone else has scribbled a reply, "She doesn't do refunds." You can't help but smile. The deeper you go, the more complex the system becomes. And above you, Rome continues to grow. The forum bustles. Senators argue. Markets trade. Children run down alleys with sticky fingers and half-eaten dates. No one above knows quite how intricate the world below has become. The Cloaca Maxima becomes more than just a drain. It becomes part of the city's mythology. A place whispered about in taverns and temples. A symbol of Roman ingenuity. And occasionally, a punchline. One popular joke from the time. Why did the philosopher refuse to use the public latrine? Because he didn't want to flush away his dignity. Okay, Roman humor wasn't great, but give them credit, they tried. In this era, engineers begin adding ventilation shafts and inspection ports. You climb up beside one now, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It leads up to street level, probably hidden behind a market stall or a statue. A few brave souls make a living cleaning these shafts, poking clogs free with long rods, sometimes crawling down to clear blockages. They're called foricariae. It's not glamorous, but it pays. Barely. There's even a semi-respected guild for sewer workers. Their symbol? A stylized pipe flanked by olive branches. Unity, and maybe a little olive oil to keep things sliding. One odd tidbit? There's evidence of small terracotta masks left in the tunnels. Faces with exaggerated features, probably intended to ward off evil spirits or just entertain the gods of waste. Imagine Cloacina peering down from her niche, sighing deeply as yet another prankster leaves a wide-eyed, tongue-out clay mask below her feet. And yet, the reverence remains. Rome's religion was built on reciprocity. You honor the gods and they keep your world turning, or flushing in this case. No one wanted to be the household that forgot Cloacina during a festival. Rumor had it those homes were the first to flood come autumn. So once a year, a quiet little ceremony is held at her shrine. No trumpets. No wild sacrifices. Just a few officials, some incense, a libation of clean water poured into the drain. A thank you. A nod to the goddess who kept their sandals dry and their reputations intact. You sit now at a dry ledge, listening to the hum of the city above, the whisper of water below. Cloacina's job was unglamorous, but her influence ran deep, literally. And somewhere in this forgotten tunnel, beneath the marble and gold of Rome, she still lingers. Watching. Waiting. Purifying. Or maybe just shaking her head and muttering, "Don't put fruit pits in the drain." You continue your slow walk through the tunnel, and something shifts in the air. It's darker now. The walls narrow. The echoes change. Less open cathedral, more forgotten attic. The stones are slick, and every sound, every splash, every shuffle, feels like it might belong to someone or something else. You're deeper than before, deeper than most Romans ever dared go. This is the forum's underbelly, the oldest, most central part of the Cloaca Maxima. You shine your torch along the ceiling, where small, uneven bricks have been patched into older Etruscan stonework. The layers tell stories. First came the ditch, then the stone channel, then the vaulting arch to stop the world above from collapsing into the muck. It's all here, still holding, just barely. You turn a corner, and suddenly, the silence breaks. A rustling. Scurrying. You freeze. Two beady eyes flash in the darkness, then vanish with a tiny splash. Rats. The eternal residents of every city, before and after gods, emperors, and indoor plumbing. You greet them with the casual nod of someone who knows better than to get in their way. The floor is strewn with debris, ancient and otherwise. A rusted coin. A bone hairpin. A broken oil lamp with a faded scene of a man reclining at dinner, probably unaware his garbage would outlive him. You kneel to inspect a tile shard etched with something suspiciously like a tally mark. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then a tiny Roman numeral V. Counting days? Counting debts? Counting how many times someone slipped and fell? Historians still argue whether such markings were work records or board graffiti. Either way, someone crouched here long ago, pressed that line into clay, and moved on. Further in, the air thickens, not with smell, but with memory. You're standing now beneath the very heart of ancient Rome. Above you, the forum, once teeming with orators, pickpockets, priests, and pretzel vendors. And below it also, the forgotten flow. You pause beside a wide junction. Water trickles slowly from 3 channels, converging into one. The sound it makes is gentle, almost musical, like a lullaby written by a plumber. A small bronze charm lies wedged in a crack nearby. It's shaped like a tiny hand. The Romans had facina, good luck charms shaped like hands, or occasionally more private parts. This one seems tame, but you know its job. Ward off bad luck, envy, blockages. You resist the urge to pocket it. Cloacina is watching. As you move again, something overhead catches your eye. A shaft of light streams down through a grated opening far above, illuminating a mosaic fragment still clinging to the wall. It's part of a fish, blue and green tiles glimmering like a memory of the sea. It's easy to forget that water, in Rome, wasn't just practical, It was sacred. Flow was life. Stagnation was death. To keep things moving, to drain the bad and welcome the new, that wasn't just engineering. It was philosophy. That's why the sewers weren't hidden or shameful. They were part of the city's story. Augustus himself, emperor and master propagandist, famously toured the Cloaca Maxima to show the citizens how seriously he took public health. It was political theater, but also, for once, genuinely useful theater. One emperor, Domitian, even built a private passageway connecting his palace to the Cloaca Maxima. Some say for drainage, others say for discreet escapes. Historians still argue whether this was paranoia, practicality, or just a fancy shortcut to the bathhouse. You take a narrow side passage now, ducking slightly to avoid a low beam. The tunnel walls tighten. This area served the market above, once bustling with vendors, livestock, and culinary ambition. Every spilled amphora, every squished fig, every fish scale from the market above, down it came, through the gratings, into this slow-moving underground river. There's a story about a wealthy merchant whose warehouse drain backed up on the morning of a major grain delivery. He tried to bribe a priest, thinking maybe Cloacina would respond faster than the maintenance crew. The priest took the coin, sprinkled some herbs, and said a prayer. The blockage remained. The priest shrugged and said, "She's divine, not a miracle worker." You glance up and spot another shrine, smaller, more makeshift. Just a hollow in the wall, some soot-streaked tiles, and the faint remains of a laurel wreath. You can picture someone, perhaps a worker or a merchant, placing it there in a moment of frustration or hope. Maybe both. You rest a hand on the stone. It's worn smooth by time and touch. You're not the first to stand here. And you won't be the last. Another odd discovery. Archaeologists once found a set of bronze tweezers in this section of tunnel. Perfectly preserved. Just lying there. Were they dropped by a sewer cleaner? A fleeing thief? Or did someone try to give Cloacina a beauty treatment? We'll never know. But the absurdity lingers. As you turn back toward the main tunnel, you pass a deeper pool. Something glimmers in the water. More coins. Offerings? Or simply the clumsiness of toga-clad citizens with loose pockets. Some look Roman. Others are clearly medieval. Even a few modern bits. A euro coin, a subway token. People never stopped throwing things in and whispering wishes, even when they stopped believing anyone was listening. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Above your head, faint noises rise. The clang of hooves, distant voices, the creak of wagons. Rome continues, layer upon layer. But down here, the past is still flowing quietly, invisibly, just beneath the surface. You close your eyes. The air is damp and heavy, but oddly peaceful. There's a rhythm to it, a pulsing stillness. You could fall asleep here, if not for the rats. Still, for all its filth, the forum's underbelly holds something sacred. Something steady. Something quietly, stubbornly alive. And as you move forward once more, torch flickering, footsteps echoing, you whisper your thanks. Just in case. You emerge from the darker depths of the forum's underbelly into a broader, brighter corridor. A warm breeze greets you, no longer the cool breath of hidden tunnels but the moist, perfumed air of a bathhouse. A Roman therme. And not just anyone, but one of the grand public baths funded by emperors to show just how clean, sophisticated, and incredibly fond of lounging Romans could be. The baths of Caracalla, maybe. Or Diocletian's sprawling complex. Doesn't matter. You step inside, and it's like entering a spa designed by someone with infinite money and very questionable boundaries. Steam curls upward from pools of varying temperatures. Columns rise high, their capitals carved with laurel leaves, dolphins, and, somewhat questionably, men wrestling. The walls are painted with scenes from myth, Venus rising from the sea, Hercules scrubbing his armpits. You're surrounded by laughter, gossip, and the rhythmic slap of water on stone. But you're not here to soak. You're here to follow the pipes. You skirt the edge of the tepidarium, the warm room, carefully stepping around a child chasing a slippery bar of soap. The floor is a mosaic of blue and white tiles, and beneath it, the famous hypocaust system hums. Hot air from a furnace flows through channels under the floor, warming the room from below like a very elaborate toaster oven. The baths are marvels of luxury, yes, but they are also engineering masterpieces. And beneath the painted ceilings and polished floors, there's a parallel world: drains, gutters, outflows. Water in, waste out. All of it carefully controlled. You duck through a narrow side door where few bathers ever go. Instantly, the laughter fades. The lighting dims. And the sound changes, from the echo of voices to the gurgle of moving water. Here lie the bucket chains, the catchment basins, and the maintenance corridors. And yes, more rats. Romans believed in cleanliness. They also believed in delegation. Bathhouse staff, sometimes enslaved, sometimes hired, worked down here, ensuring the complex didn't turn into a lukewarm cesspool. They cleared clogs, managed flow, and even recycled water from one pool to another. Not the most glamorous job, but a steady one. You step beside a large pipe made of stone-lined terracotta. It vibrates slightly as water gushes through. You place your hand on it. This was once the outflow from the caldarium, the hot bath. A constant stream of warm, soapy runoff heading into the sewers, and eventually into the Tiber. And guess whose name was occasionally carved onto these pipes? That's right, Cloacina. Historians still argue whether invoking her name in plumbing inscriptions was reverent, routine, or just branding. One example reads, "Under the care of Cloacina, may this pipe never clog." Another, more casual, "Cloacina, this better work." And not all pipes were equal. Some bathhouses boasted about their double drainage systems, clean and dirty water kept separate, in theory. Others didn't bother. One archaeological find revealed a small altar wedged awkwardly between two waste channels, suggesting that someone, at least, was trying to hedge their bets. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. At one site, a collapsed tile ceiling in a drainage corridor revealed dozens of oil lamp fragments. Not discarded, just left. Some think the workers lit them during shifts and simply didn't bother collecting them after. Others believe it was ritual. That every time they descended into the waterworks, they lit a flame for protection. Or for company. You pass one of these lamps now. Still intact. A tiny design stamped into the clay, a dolphin midleap. A flicker of light in a damp world. You move on, ducking under a low arch, and find yourself following a rivulet of gray water down a sloping corridor. The floor is worn smooth, generations of slippered feet, running sandals, and hurrying maintenance workers have polished the stones to a quiet sheen. And overhead, the ceiling arches like a tunnel of ribs, echoing every drop and trickle. You pause to catch your breath. The air is humid, but clean. Which is ironic, considering what's flowing just below you. Soap, sweat, oil, traces of perfume, and, well, human nature. Above, the bathhouse continues in full swing. You can hear faint voices, someone reciting a poem, another person arguing about the best seafood vendor on the Aventine. Romans came to the baths for hygiene, yes, but also for gossip, business deals, even matchmaking. And underneath it all, pipes and prayers. Another quirky detail, Romans used a tool called a strigil to scrape dirt, oil, and sweat off their bodies. These curved metal instruments were essential to the bathing ritual. And once they finished scraping, where did all that grime go? That's right, into the drains. Into the Cloaca Maxima. Into Cloacina's care. You pass a small alcove where someone has scratched a quick sketch into the stone. It's a bathhouse scene, two figures facing away, a third in between holding a strigil. Underneath, the Latin reads, "Even the gods bathe." You chuckle. Whether it was reverence or sarcasm, you can't say. But the Romans didn't keep their gods far from their daily lives. Even here, in the mix of soap and sewage, there was something sacred. You climb a short set of stairs and peer through a maintenance grate. A bath attendant is filling a basin with steaming water. He hums as he works. Oblivious to you, to the tunnel beneath him, and to the fact that the goddess of sewers might be listening in. You lean back against the wall, feeling the stone cool your spine. The water flows steadily past. It smells faintly of lavender and sulfur. Not pleasant, exactly, but not offensive either. It's the scent of a system that still works. A balance maintained. And somewhere, maybe far downstream, Cloacina nods her quiet approval. Your footsteps soften now, the walls becoming smoother, more worn by time and water. The tunnel begins to curve, leading you away from the bathhouses and toward something quieter. More ritual. Less rinsing. Ahead a glow. Not torchlight, but candlelit. You step into a chamber just wide enough for 5 or 6 people to stand shoulder to shoulder. The air is dense with scent, incense, herbs, and that faint must of always damp stone. A few niches line the walls. Some hold flickering candles. Others hold the remains of what might have once been offerings. A faded wreath, an empty oil jar, a tiny ceramic turtle. This is no marketplace, no bathhouse, no bustling sewer junction. This is sacred ground. Here, deep beneath the daily chaos of Roman life, you've stumbled upon something rare, a dedicated ritual site to Cloacina, the goddess of purity, flowing water, and, let's be honest, whatever was left behind. But she's more than that down here. She's a quiet constant, a silent witness, a protector of balance in the dirtiest corners of life. Someone has painted her name on the wall in careful red letters, Cloacina. It's framed by 2 fish. Above it, a crescent moon. You kneel before the central basin. It's carved from solid stone, slick with condensation. A trickle of water flows in from one pipe, then exits from another, steady and circular. An eternal rinse cycle. And beside it, laid neatly on a piece of linen, rosemary, sage, a pinch of salt, and what might be dried rose petals. A makeshift offering. Historians still argue whether such underground rituals were officially sanctioned or more grassroots. Some records suggest local priestesses included sewer offerings in certain purification rites. Others think it was personal, one person's act of reverence, hidden far from the noise of temples and crowds. You lean closer and spot another inscription. It's scratched faintly into the rim of the basin. May she carry away all that burdens. It's not just about waste, is it? You suddenly understand the deeper appeal of a sewer goddess. She doesn't just wash away filth. She carries what no one else wants to touch. What can't be aired in public. Regret, shame, memory. Whatever you need to release, you give to her. Quietly. No judgment. You close your eyes. Listen. Water trickles in steady rhythm. A drop falls from the ceiling into the basin, plip, and ripples gently outward. It's almost meditative. You could stay here, in this strange, sacred stink. Just breathing. Letting go. But the ritual isn't over yet. You move to the far end of the chamber, where a small stone bowl is fixed into the wall. A candle burns beside it. You recognize the scent now, cedar, and something sweet. Honey, maybe? It clings to the air like memory. A small plaque above the bowl reads, "To cleanse is to honor. To forget is to decay." You smile. That sounds just Roman enough. Always obsessed with virtue, but with just enough edge to make it practical. You hear movement behind you. Someone else entering the chamber? No, just the water shifting as if exhaling. The Romans believed in noumena, spirits that inhabited places, objects, forces of nature. Not all gods had faces. Not all divinity was loud. Cloacina, in many ways, was a numen. A presence more than a person. You didn't worship her with gold or blood. You honored her by keeping things moving. By not letting the rot linger. Every society has its sacred stink. Even in a world of gods who hurl thunderbolts and seduce mortals left and right, you need someone to bless the drains. Someone to accept what others deny. Someone who sees it all, and purifies it anyway. There's a rumor that during one great festival, maybe the Ludi Romani, a group of senators got drunk and decided to include Cloacina in the parade. They made a garlanded float shaped like a giant pipe, with a man dressed in a white toga waving a toilet brush. Some say the crowd laughed. Others say they bowed their heads. Fringe? Absolutely. But not impossible. You sit now, back against the wall, watching the candlelight flicker. This chamber wasn't on any map. It's not listed in tourist brochures. But you know someone's been here recently. The offerings are too fresh. The flame too steady. You wonder, who still comes? A sanitation worker sneaking down during his lunch break? An old priestess keeping secret rites alive? Or maybe just someone who needs to leave something behind, quietly, anonymously. It doesn't matter. Cloacina accepts it all. Above your head, the city thrums on, noisy, proud, impatient. But down here, beneath it all, a rhythm continues. Steady. Cleansing. You whisper a small thanks, not for fortune, not for victory, but for relief. For the slow, sacred trickle that carries away what no one else wants. For the strange blessing of being able to let go. You rise, lighter somehow. A final glance over your shoulder. The basin still flows. The candle still burns. And Cloacina, ever silent, watches on. The tunnel rises gently now, lifting you out of ritual stillness and back into motion. The air grows cooler again, more open. You feel the city breathing above you, not the sleepy inhale of midnight forums, but the restless march of expansion. Rome is no longer a city. It is an empire. And with empire comes plumbing. You step through a vaulted stone gate, an ancient junction, into a newer section of the Cloaca Maxima. The brickwork is tighter here, the arch is more ambitious. This is no longer the work of muddy-ankled farmers hoping to drain their fields. This is the work of engineers, of architects, of empire. The kind of sewer that says, yes, we conquered Gaul, and now we're going to conquer your waste. You feel it before you see it, the great Roman urge to build, to systematize, to control, and to export it everywhere. You follow the tunnel as it opens into a long corridor marked with milestones, not for walking but for maintenance crews. A plaque above your head reads Via Cloacini XTI. You're in a stretch that once led engineers out of the city, downriver, toward the next big idea, exporting Roman sanitation to the provinces. Because if there's one thing the Romans loved more than aqueducts, it was aqueducts they could brag about in foreign lands. You imagine yourself now on a slow wagon, bumping along a Roman road through Gaul. Behind you, crates of bricks and brass fittings. Ahead, a town of thatched roofs and skeptical locals. And in the back, a young engineer named Marcus who won't stop quoting Vitruvius. When the Romans colonized, they brought with them more than soldiers. They brought baths, roads, aqueducts, and yes, sewers. One of the first things they do in a new settlement? Lay out the street grid. Right angles. Straight lines. Then, dig trenches for water and waste. Not because it was glamorous, but because it worked. You pass by a carved diagram etched into the stone here, crudely, like a notebook margin doodle. It shows a villa, an aqueduct line, and a sewer trench all labeled with arrows. Someone, maybe an apprentice, had mapped out their job in graffiti. And beside it, a single word, puritas, cleanliness. A Roman virtue, especially when on display. In Gaul, in Hispania, in Britannia, the empire expanded not just by force, but by flow. Even the farthest military outposts had rudimentary drains. You crouch now beside a culvert modeled after one found in Vindolanda, near Hadrian's Wall. It's small, barely wider than your shoulders, but the workmanship is unmistakable. A Roman fingerprint in foreign mud. Historians still argue whether local populations adopted Roman plumbing willingly or just tolerated it. Some evidence suggests initial resistance. Why change the ways of your ancestors just to channel bathwater? But over time, many towns embraced it. Clean streets, dry foundations, public latrines with heated seats? Hard to argue. In one British settlement, archaeologists discovered a small altar to Sulis Minerva, an Anglo-Roman goddess, placed beside a drain outlet. She wasn't Cloacina, but she served a similar role, guardian of the sacred and the septic. You pass another branching tunnel now, this one narrower and lined with lime deposits. You touch the crusty wall, evidence of mineral-rich water once rushing through, flushing away the waste of a town long swallowed by fields. Somewhere ahead, voices rise, faint, imagined. Engineers arguing over slope ratios. A legionary grumbling about the smell near the camp latrines. A local woman scolding a Roman for dumping wine dregs too close to her garden. The empire was a chorus of contradictions. But the plumbing? that, at least, had a method. You enter a large chamber, an inspection vault. Here, the main flows from several smaller towns once converged before being channeled toward the Tiber. It's massive, echoing. There's a small platform along one wall, where workers would have stood to monitor and clear blockages. And on the back of that wall, someone painted a mural. Faded, barely visible, but unmistakable. A figure with flowing robes, standing over a stream. One hand raised, the other extended in welcome. Cloacina. Exported. She followed the empire, it seems. Or maybe the idea of her did. Wherever the Romans brought their waterworks, they brought their habits, and their quiet superstitions. Even in the far corners of empire, the sewer had its spirit. There's a joke carved into the platform edge. All drains lead to Cloacina. You sit for a moment, the echo of that idea washing over you. Rome wasn't just marble and oratory. It was grout. It was labor. It was drainage. And in that mix, it carried not only soldiers and merchants, but a worldview that civilization meant control. Of space. Of water. Of filth. In one outpost, clay tokens were found stamped with both an imperial eagle and a simple pipe symbol. They may have been work assignments, or even sewer tax markers. No gold wreaths, no laurel crowns, just proof that somewhere out there, a bureaucrat was managing excrement with astonishing seriousness. You can't help but respect that. As you rise and continue through the tunnel, you find yourself marveling not at Rome's conquests, but at its commitments. It didn't just build monuments to glory, it built gutters. And then made those gutters holy. And somewhere, hundreds of miles from the Forum, under a sky heavy with northern mist, a quiet trickle flowed through a stone channel, and into the care of a goddess who never stopped working. You follow the tunnel onward, but something's changed. The bricks underfoot are cracked. The mortar crumbles when touched. The steady, confident rush of water has weakened to a hesitant trickle. Every few steps, you find debris. A collapsed arch, a clogged side channel, a rat skeleton curled in dust. Rome is slowing down. You're not at the end yet, but you're far past the empire's prime. The grandeur of aqueducts, the meticulous grids of sewers stretching into distant provinces, all of it begins to unravel here in this dark, uneven corridor. You can almost hear it, the sigh of a civilization forgetting how its own systems worked. Up above, the city limps on. It's the 5th century now. Invaders press from all directions. The emperors are shadows of their former selves, more concerned with court intrigue than the condition of public drains. The Senate argues while tiles fall from the roof. Gold is hoarded. Marble is stripped. And no one remembers to clear the silt from the southern junction of the Cloaca Maxima. That junction is where you stand now. Water backs up behind a mass of debris, rubble from a fallen arch, shattered amphory, maybe even the leg of a long-forgotten statue. You can still smell the water trying to move. Still hear it. But it's fighting a losing battle. Historians still argue whether this decline was fast or slow. Whether the infrastructure fell apart all at once, or eroded like a tooth no one brushed. But evidence suggests the latter. A little decay here. A collapsed pipe there. And gradually, inevitably, the sewers, once the veins of the city, clogged with the very detritus they were designed to carry away. You find a fragment of graffiti nearby. Faded, but decipherable, Cloacina, we are drowning. A cry for help? A joke? A final prayer? Who knows? But it speaks to the spirit of a people watching their world fall apart and wondering if even the goddess of sewers had stopped listening. In the forums, weeds grow between the stones. In the bathhouses, the furnaces go cold. And in the tunnels, rats reign unchallenged. Maintenance crews vanish, funding dries up, and religious rituals, already crumbling under the rise of Christianity, fade into silence. You enter a chamber meant to serve as a filtration pool. It's half filled with stagnant water, thick with green. A frog croaks lazily as you disturb the surface. On the wall, barely clinging to the stone, is a shrine. Cloacina again, though the carving has been worn down to a smooth oval. Someone has tried to chisel a cross over her. A new faith replacing an old one. But the lines are hesitant, almost apologetic. As if the chisel paused mid-stroke. You linger there, thinking. Rome didn't fall because it was defeated. It fell because it stopped flowing. And in this tunnel, that truth is literal. The empire's pride had once been its ability to control the unclean, to turn waste into wonder, to give even sewage a sacred rhythm. But now, the rhythm has broken. You kneel beside a runoff gutter. Inside, you find shards of pottery stamped with imperial crests. Once symbols of order, now just trash. You wonder, did the people above know how close they were to collapse? Did they hear the silence creeping up from below? One scholar once wrote, civilization begins with plumbing. Maybe its end is when the plumbing forgets how to hum. You continue forward, ducking under a collapsing arch. The tunnel shrinks. The floor tilts. You slip slightly, catch yourself on a rusted metal rung embedded in the wall. Another inspection hatch, long sealed. Above it, a phrase in etched Latin, "She still listens." Do you believe that? Maybe someone did. Maybe, even in decline, they lit a candle, said a few words, and hoped that the flow would return. That the water would wash the city clean again. That Cloacina hadn't abandoned them entirely. But it wasn't just faith that failed. It was attention. The empire had stretched too far. Too fast. And in the chaos, it forgot what made cities work. Sewers. Roads. Flow. Eventually, people began abandoning the great buildings. The Colosseum became a quarry. Temples became churches. The Forum became pasture. And the Cloaca Maxima? It clogged. Not completely. Never completely. Some trickle always remained. Just enough to whisper, "I'm still here." One oddity remains from this period. A 6th century poem discovered in a monastery cellar makes a passing reference to the goddess beneath our feet. It's vague, cryptic, but some believe it's the last known mention of Cloacina. No name. Just the idea that something still flowed below. You climb a short slope now, the tunnel narrowing to a crawl. The final years of the Roman sewer system weren't marked by dramatic collapse, but by slow forgetting. And here, in the smallest passage, you feel that forgetting in your bones. There are no more offerings. No fresh incense. Just the echo of a civilization that once built shrines to sanitation and now stumbles through the dark, unsure of where it left its keys. Or its goddess. You take one last look around. The water still moves, barely. A thread of silver in the dark. And you move on, into silence. You press forward through the narrowing tunnel, and suddenly, the ceiling arches higher again. The walls are newer, reinforced. And there, ahead of you, a faint glimmer. Not candlelight. Not torchlight. Daylight. You emerge into a half-flooded corridor lined with scaffolding and the bright yellow warning signs of modern archaeology. Safety tape flutters. A small electric lamp hums from a tripod. This part of the Cloaca Maxima has been opened up, just slightly, to allow researchers, preservationists, and the occasional wide-eyed tourist to peek into history's plumbing. You step into the shallow water, and it ripples outward across 2 millennia. You're in the present now. But the past hasn't gone anywhere. Rome, the city above, has changed 1,000 times. But under its streets, the bones of the old empire remain. And here in the sewer's twilight, something remarkable happened. They remembered Cloacina. You spot it in the corner. A new plaque, mounted beside a reinforced archway. It's bronze, polished. Modern Latin inscription at the top. Below, the English translation. To Cloacina, the purifier, guardian of Rome's oldest breath. May she be remembered not for the filth, but for the flow. Someone still cares. Archaeologists rediscovered this stretch in the 1800s, and in the usual Roman fashion, they approached it with a mix of reverence, ambition, and opportunism. Some wanted to study. Others wanted to brag. A few probably wanted to redecorate it into a wine cellar. But in the process, they uncovered pieces of something forgotten, not just the bricks and pipes, but the idea that sanitation had once been holy. Coins were found, still resting beneath the mossy altar. Tiles inscribed with fragments of prayers. That little clay turtle, now in a museum case, labeled votive offering probable. One excavation report included this line: "The shrine shows evidence of recurring human visitation long after formal rites ceased." Someone was still lighting candles, centuries later. Historians still argue whether this constitutes proof of unbroken worship or just coincidental superstition. But it hardly matters. In the quiet moments, faith doesn't need proof. It just needs persistence. And the city finally began to remember. You climb a small metal staircase leading up to a modern observation deck. Above you, daylight slants through a grate. You can see tourists passing by, maps in hand, completely unaware that just below their feet lies a goddess of sewers. Still waiting. Still working. Beside the platform is a framed photograph. A restoration team brushing silt from the Cloacina statue, still in situ, now lovingly preserved behind a protective panel. One worker holds a toothbrush. The caption reads, "Even a goddess needs a little polish." You smile. There's something poetic about it. We chase glory, build monuments, tell grand stories about emperors and battles. But the thread that holds it all together, the quiet flow beneath, is what actually keeps us going. Keeps us clean. Not just literally. Emotionally. Spiritually. Because maybe that's what Cloacina always represented. The parts of ourselves we'd rather not see, but desperately need to process. She didn't punish or bless. She just carried it all away. You step back down to the water's edge. A tiny leaf floats past, fresh, bright green, dropped from the modern world above. It drifts into the dark, like every offering before it. And just like that, you feel it. Rome isn't gone. It never was. It just flows differently now. And Cloacina? She's still here. Not as a thunderbolt-wielding goddess or a marble statue in a gilded temple, but as an idea. A whisper. A reminder that even the dirtiest places can be sacred. That what we flush away still matters. That dignity sometimes begins with drains. So you stand in the half-shadow, the water at your feet, and breathe in the mingled scent of stone, earth, and the faintest trace of incense. Then you turn slowly, ready to leave this underground world, one step at a time. Not up, but inward. Back toward stillness. You've reached the end of the journey now. The sounds begin to soften. The tunnel fades behind you. The stones grow smoother. The water slows to a gentle hush. And above, the city sleeps. Let your breathing match the rhythm of that ancient flow, steady, effortless, quiet. In your mind's eye, retrace the path you walked. The mud of early settlements, the roar of imperial Rome, the fading light of decline, and finally, the rediscovery. Cloacina's presence, constant through every age. She never demanded attention. She simply endured. Like the best kind of strength. Feel the weight of the city dissolve from your shoulders. Let go of whatever you've been carrying. Whatever thoughts keep circling. Whatever emotions you've been holding back. This is your moment to release. Picture that soft trickle, carrying everything away. Not lost, just transformed. Buried under time. Honored, even if forgotten. You are safe now. You are clean. Not in the way of polished stone or perfumed bathwater, but in the way of something washed clear by time, touched by silence, returned to stillness. Let your breath slow further. Let your thoughts settle like dust in calm water. The goddess is still listening. You don't need to speak. You only need to rest. The flow will carry everything else. Good night.